Welcome back to It's All Woo to Me. I'm thrilled to be back after a bit of a hiatus. It's been a few months, and this podcast, it has been, resting, but today I'm coming back. It's coming back to life, and I couldn't be more excited. And, I thought, what a better way to bring it back to life than having today's guest, who had a massive, massive stroke back in 2021. She had a near-death experience, and she spent time on the other side before, I suppose, ultimately deciding to come back to the earthly plane. So, Amber, it's such an honor to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you. So, I suppose, I have always been so interested in near-death experiences and everything that comes with it. And when I came across your story, and I know I mentioned when we spoke earlier that I haven't actually purposely looked too much into it. I see little snippets because I just want to hear all about it from you today. So let's just get straight into the guts of it. What happened?
So I'll preface it by saying I was a psychic medium before the stroke. So I was born different than the average human. From my earliest memories, I could see dead people. I had like psychic visions and dreams and intuition and feeling. So I had been sort of dealing with the other side stuff most of my life. It wasn't until I was 35 that I accepted my gifts. I wanted nothing to do with them. I actually went into social work and was working as in mental health and addictions for 10 years before I accepted my gifts. So that I accepted my gifts in 2016. So I was a working psychic medium from 2016 until I had the stroke in 2021. So I'm not one of the people who woke up gifted. I was already gifted. And so I had no sort of, everybody always says, what kind of psychic are you that you didn't know you were going to have a massive stroke? I choose not to know things that I can't change. So if I cannot fix or change or prevent an outcome, I have a boundary that I don't want to know it. And the other side really respects your boundaries most of the time. But I did know something was going on because we were coming up to Christmas. I had the stroke December 23rd, like 22nd, 23rd of 2021. And we're coming up to Christmas. And usually I'm preparing. I have a huge dinner for people. This was going to be my first dinner since COVID started because in Canada, where I'm from, there was a lot of rules. So this was the first time I was inviting people for Christmas since 2019. And normally I would be baking and getting the freezer full of all the stuff I needed. And instead, I was making freezer meals. And I couldn't explain why I was doing it, but I just kept making chili and spaghetti and lasagna and and my husband's like, what are you doing? Like, we don't have room for this. Like, why are you cooking like the week before Christmas? I'm like, I don't know why. I just feel like, I needed to. Yeah. And so it turned out I cooked 6 weeks of freezer meals, which was the exact amount of time that when I got back from the hospital and the ICU, I couldn't cook those first 6 to 8 weeks at all. So my family had home cooked meals, which was nice because my husband, bless his soul, is not an amazing cook. He does a mean breakfast, but he kind of caps at
breakfast 3 times a day.
Yeah, no. So I kind of knew and also didn't. But I'll make it a shorter story if people want to actually see the full what I went through. I live videoed all of it on my Facebook, but we were making gingerbread houses as a family for the whole day. And then we were watching a Christmas movie. And when the Christmas movie started, all of a sudden I had the worst headache I have ever felt in my life. And I tried to kind of power through because it was, 3 days till Christmas. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, you know what? I just don't feel good. My head is pounding. I have to go to bed. So I went to bed and left my husband and kids on the couch. And apparently about an hour later, I messaged my husband and said, this headache is so bad that I can't sleep. Can you bring me some Tylenol and Advil? And he did. I don't remember sending that text. And then I guess I took the pills and I fell asleep or went into unconsciousness. And I had the stroke. They think about an hour and a half from then. So I went to bed at, I think, 9:30, got the pills at 10:30, and they think, yeah, around 11:30, I had a stroke, and it didn't wake me up. And so by the time I woke up at 4:45 in the morning, it was a completed stroke, which means the blood clot went all the way through that artery and completed. So every branch of that artery was dead. And because I didn't wake up, it caused a second stroke in my frontal lobe. And that one was still active, still bleeding. And I was completely paralyzed on my right side. I was nonverbal, and my husband had fallen asleep on the couch. So, long story short, I fell out of bed, had to crawl because I couldn't walk. I couldn't get anywhere. So I banged on the wall and it woke up my husband, and he came in, and he's like trained in a high level of first aid. So he knew almost right away that I had a stroke. And so he called 911. They came, they didn't think it was a stroke. They thought I was drunk, which is so strange because I had the classic signs of a stroke. I got to the hospital, and this is a very long thing put into a short amount. And they were chatting over top of me with all the other paramedics. Nobody was paying attention to me. I couldn't talk because I lost all verbal ability. I could say two words, my sister's name and the F word, which was wonderful. But I thought I was talking, but I was mumbling. And finally, an intake nurse turned around and looked at me, and it clicked. And he said, "What are you guys doing? She's obviously had a stroke." And then everything went crazy, and I very quickly lost consciousness. I don't really remember the CT or anything like that. They tried to treat the stroke with TPA, which is an anti-clot medication that's super dangerous and can kill you, but also can fix it. And it did stop the frontal lobe stroke, but the other one, there was nothing they could do. Those deficits would be permanent. Because it didn't work and I was still completely paralyzed, I was blind in my right eye and I couldn't talk. They were going to airlift me to a bigger hospital to do, it's a brain surgery where they go in and try and remove the clot. And so everything went really quick. Before we knew it, we were in a helicopter. And that is when I went to the other side. So it was, yeah, the most stressful time for my family. A lot of it I don't really remember. I was in the helicopter. The sun was on my face, and my husband was trying to block the sun. And then I closed my eyes and I woke up on the other side.
Yeah.
And it was that quick.
Yeah. And did you know as soon as you went over, was there an acknowledgement or a knowing of where you were?
Yeah, 100%. Any questions, like any ability or need for the question why is taken. Is no why. Everything makes sense. You don't have to ask literally anything because you understand everything on a more human level. I didn't have the infinite knowledge of somebody who was fully crossed over, but I knew what I was there for. I knew the purpose. I could see my body still. I could see my husband. And so my husband was in the helicopter with me still. My whole family had left the other hospital to go home and pack. And then it was like a 2-hour drive to the other hospital. And so I could see everyone. I could see how panicked they were. But I was kind of, you're removed from it a little bit. Like it didn't stress me out. I didn't feel sad for them. I didn't feel bad for them. I could see it and I could understand what was happening, but my purpose was to be there. And it was, you can't even put it into words. It was the most beautiful garden with like colors that just don't exist here. Like you can't even, like I've tried. The one gift I did come back with was the ability to paint. And I have tried so hard to
Yeah.
try to make like the fuchsias and the teals, and you just can't. It
Would you
was so
describe it
amazing.
as would you describe it as vibrant or just different colors?
Both. It's like everything, every blade of grass, every molecule of water, because there was like a little creek, all emanated with that higher power. So, like this golden rainbow light. And then under that was the most vibrant, like the color of the grass wasn't even something you can explain here. Everything communicated as well. So, like, I didn't have to. So when I got there, I was standing by this little pond, and ahead of me was my guides, who I already knew because I've been doing this work, for a while. To the left was some of my family and some of my dogs, who most of them had crossed over. Only one was still alive, and I was like, "What? Why is she here?" You don't ask
Yeah.
why, but as a human, now I'm like, "That's so strange."
Yeah.
But she actually crossed over 4 days after the stroke. So she was kind of in between already because she had
Between.
dementia. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and my kids and my husband were there, because I needed to know that no matter what, I would be with them. Because if the choice was, leave here and go back and be with my kids, and if I chose to stay there and I didn't get to be with my kids, I would have chosen to go back no matter what. And then up the field was this giant group of people, and it was all my other lives.
Yeah. So when you sort of were in that experience, you said you saw, your family and your pets, and even your dog at the time, which was still in this
Yeah.
plane, in this dimension. Not for long, as it turns out. But it's in your husband and your children. So how would you describe that to me? So, for example, your husband and children were technically still here,
Yeah.
but they were also there. Is that a connection through, I'm just thinking with my work, is that like a connection through their higher self, or?
Their higher selves, yeah, because our higher self is always on the other side. But it's hard for a human to fully understand that, like,
Mm.
because when we picture ourselves, we picture us looking like this. We don't necessarily think you will recognize everyone on the other side just by their energy. So it doesn't matter if they look like the people you knew here. Your 95-year-old grandma is probably not going to look 95 because that wasn't when she felt the best. She'll look how she felt the best, kind of thing. So they were their higher selves. For them, like my kids and my husband, they looked more like what they look like here. Whereas, like, my mother-in-law was there and my two grandmas, they looked younger, but I knew their souls. I recognized their souls, so I knew it was them.
Yeah.
So that I knew it was them, but they definitely didn't look exactly how I remembered them as
Yeah.
a living human.
I know what you mean, because I know in my own work, as you know, I do QHHT, which is quantum healing hypnosis technique. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's the
Yeah.
Dolores Cannon method, and
Yeah.
I myself have obviously had a few sessions as well, and I know from my own experience just through that, if I'm visiting a past life, or let's go another dimension, let's say, I'll recognize people that I know now, but they're not who they are now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I see what you mean. You sort of recognize their energy. You just know it's
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite fascinating how that works. And you also said earlier, when you were there, you could see yourself here,
Yeah.
so you were in the helicopter at the time, where you could
Yeah,
see.
I was in
Okay.
the helicopter. So the NDE happened. So I never clinically died. So it
Mm.
was a near death experience, definitely not a death experience. I didn't fully die, but I was like on the verge. I was clinging to life. So when I went to the other side, my temperature had started rising because my brain was swelling so fast, my body couldn't handle it. And that's sort of what happened. I guess when you're dying, your temperature can go really high. So I stayed on the other side. The helicopter ride was only about 15 minutes, and I didn't go to the other side till like more than halfway through. And then we landed. I got into the hospital, and very quickly I started having a grand mal seizure. And if I chose to come, like, to die, I was going to have the seizure. It would have damaged my brain more. And I would essentially, because of the brain swelling, be dead, but not fully dead. And my husband would have to sort of pull the plug. if you want to, it sounds bad,
Yeah.
but so they showed me that was what would happen if I chose to stay on this. But because I chose to come back, I had the grand mal seizure. And the second it was over, I was back in my body.
Wow. So how did you feel to see your other body from the other side? So looking down on your body, did you feel any emotional connection to it, or was it just like, oh, there's my body, cool? Like,
Yeah, not
yeah,
yeah, more kind of, yeah, that's cool, but you're not you don't
yeah,
the things that make us human and the suffering and the pain and that like sort of wow, that like feeling bad that my husband is essentially watching me die because the doctor said there's almost no chance she will survive the helicopter ride. Like, make sure all your family comes and says goodbye because they probably will never see her again. Nothing, none of that was feeling like very impactful to me while I was on the other side because the second you're there, you know that not only did I choose this life, so did they. They chose those lessons. So if I was going to die, they chose that. They chose,
mm,
especially my kids, they chose that there was a potential that their mom was going to die when they were 12 and 14 and they were going to have to survive without her, right? We all would have spoken about that and made a plan on the other side. And you have that knowledge the second you're there. You just know it's just like, okay, yeah, no, this is just what's happening. And these are the lessons. And am I sort of ready for more lessons? Or am I feeling maybe I'm sort of done with this life because that body doesn't look super fun. And it just you just know the why is gone. So I did check in. Like I was not concerned, but wanted sort of to know what was going on. But I didn't feel the need to participate really in their emotions. And I could hear like they're in their head, like bargaining with God, even though most of my family is not religious, saying, if you let her live, I will do X, Y, Z. Like I could hear all the bargaining, I could see what they were going through, but it didn't devastate me like it would. It makes me sound heartless, but that's just how our souls are.
yeah. No, I understand because it's a different. I suppose you have a completely different perspective
Yeah.
from that place. You see things, I suppose, as they truly are,
Yeah.
as opposed to how we are here as humans, and we attach different emotions to things and
Yeah.
things that just don't exist over there. Or so I've heard. I
Kind
haven't
of,
been there personally.
yeah. Time as well, right? Time doesn't exist. So
Mm.
if I chose to die, my life it's like that in 2 seconds my whole family is going to be dead anyways, right? Because time doesn't exist. There is no we don't need that concept on the other side.
Mm.
So it's yesterday, it's last week, it's the future all at once over there, and so we're all together no matter what all the time.
Yeah. So it doesn't actually. Yeah, it's over. That's what I've heard. It's over so quickly. Like we really are
Yeah.
here for such a small blip. But having said that, we're everywhere as well. Where even
Yeah.
our past lives or future lives, they're all being lived out simultaneously, and it's like our human brains just can't grasp that concept or
Yeah.
wrap it around it. And we're human and we try and make sense of things that sometimes we're just, I think, not really meant to understand it completely.
Yeah.
It would be
Well, and
difficult.
even when I came back, I'm like, how did I even think that it was a choice? Because my human self is like, I would have never leave my kids, like, because I have all the feelings and stuff attached to it. Like, even looking back at my time on the other side, it's like, why did it take me so long to decide? Because these kids need me. But when you're on the other side, that's just not the case.
So was you said also when you got there, your guides were there and you recognized them family. Did you have I don't know, obviously you didn't have a verbal conversation with them, but was there some communication between you, your
Yeah.
family and the guides, and like questioning you or giving you that option whether you want to come back or not? Who
So
provided that to you?
all my loved ones didn't say anything. You just know that you love each other. You have that connection. It's in the soul. So they just stood to the side. They didn't come up to me. I didn't hug anybody or anything like that. I went straight for my guides, and they helped walk me through the different futures. So the future of me dying, they told me, it would be really hard, that my kids would fare better than my husband. My husband, unfortunately, would become an alcoholic. And I like this part, marry a super young woman that my kids will hate, but they'll figure it out and it'll make them strong. So they walked me through that. And then they showed me my future if I came back and told me the things that would happen. They were very honest and like said, the first 18 months would be the hardest time I have ever lived, and I will regret my decision, will want to come back, and that I would have a ton of deficits, that I would have to work through and relearn, and some of the deficits would be permanent. And they said, the first 18 months, yes, but the first 6 months, you will want to die. All you'll want to do is come back here. It will feel so pointless and so, I don't know the right word, more than depressing, like true despair of the choice I made. And I was like, when I came back and it all started happening, I was like, what, like, why in God's name would I have ever chosen to come back? Like, I felt like such a burden. I woke up, yes, with miraculously recover. I have aphasia, so words sometimes are hard. Like miraculous recovery. Even the doctor said, like, we've never seen somebody like her, but like I should have been a complete vegetable that couldn't do anything. So recovery did not feel good. I didn't feel miraculous when I was completely paralyzed on my right side, still could only say 2 words. I couldn't do anything. I had to do weeks and months of rehab. So everything they said on the other side, it sounds really good when you're on the other side, because you have the answer to everything. And yes, I took some of the stuff back with me, but a lot of it I forgot. And so I was just fully back to being human, and it was not fun.
Yeah. And so you were given the choice then of whether you wanted
Yeah.
to stay where you are and come back, and the scenarios for both, so you could make that decision. Do you feel that this experience for you, you know, was, I suppose, part of your plan? Do you feel like
Yeah.
the experience you had planned to have this experience before you came to this
Yeah.
life?
A
Do you
hundred
feel that,
percent.
yeah, did it, so it served a purpose for you then?
Yes. And there were two different, because free will exists,
Mm-hmm.
and our souls and our human selves make so many choices throughout our lives that can change our path, make it different. But we do have a not concrete
Mm-hmm.
path, but a general idea of how things are going to go. And they showed me that the stroke was only one plan. There was another plan that I would be in a car accident, and coming back, I would be paralyzed. But one of my kids would have been with me as well, and they would have had issues with addiction after, due to chronic pain from the accident. So my soul chose, no matter what, I was going to have an NDE. How it was going to happen, was sort of decided a little bit later on in life. And certain things sort of came up that made it so that the stroke would be a little bit more likely, I guess. But they did show me that there were two sort of options. And I, even today, I'm very glad I chose the stroke, even though it was hard, being paralyzed and in a wheelchair after being right-sided paralyzed for so long. I absolutely not. I probably wouldn't have come back.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. And so this, you mentioned earlier that, you've always had, psychic abilities and gifts, but so you came back with more, would you say additional gifts, or the gifts you had heightened, or a bit both?
Both. Yeah, both. So the one thing that sort of was more new after the stroke, and it took me a while to sort of figure it out, because I obviously was very unwell when I woke up, and I wasn't fully conscious for a couple of days. Like the first time I saw like a video of me like talking was on Christmas Day. I wasn't talking, I was singing, because singing is on the other side of your brain, my non-damaged side. So we sang Christmas carols. Even though I could not talk at all, I sang two Christmas carols with my family. But I didn't realize that this was a gift because I didn't know what was happening. And so it was Christmas time. And so the nurses and stuff, and obviously I was a very high needs patient. I was in the neuro ICU. So it's like, I think one nurse to two patients or something like that. So like you're always being watched. And people would come in because I also like I couldn't walk and I couldn't go to the bathroom. So I had a catheter. I had so much, I was being tube fed. And so every 15 minutes somebody was in there. And I couldn't understand why they were saying the things they were saying about me, because they would come in and like would be like, "Oh, I just feel so bad. Like she has kids and it's Christmas. I just cannot imagine that this is her life now. She's never going to walk. She's never going to eat. She's never going to talk. Like I feel so bad." And I'm like, "Why are you saying this? I'm right here. Like I can't talk, but I can see you. Why?" And I didn't realize they weren't saying it, they were thinking it. And that is something I had firm boundaries about. I've never necessarily cared what people think. I care about their soul, their energy, that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden, I'm hearing all their inner thoughts. And when you've had a massive stroke or any medical crisis, especially when you have kids, people pity you and they feel bad for you and they can't help but think about how bad they feel. And so once I sort of figured out what was happening, I was having to, my poor family, if they were having a bad day or like really feeling sorry for me or themselves, I would have to ask them to leave the room until they could collect themselves because it was so overwhelming for me to feel their sadness. And so that gift was definitely new. I've always been able to tune in when I sit and I meditate and I focus on the person. I didn't have to do anything, and everybody's thoughts were just blaringly loud in my head. So that, yeah, it took a long time to set the boundaries that I didn't want to be in everybody's heads. And my family still says, "Get out of my head," especially my teenagers.
I'd imagine going supermarket shopping would have been a nightmare, like, or anywhere
Yeah,
where there's people.
everything. Well, and hospital is not a great place to be able to read people's thoughts, especially
Oh,
like a neuro ward where people have had massive strokes or brain bleeds or things like that. So, like, people are dying on the neuro ward, maybe more than other places. And it's Christmas, and all these families are like in the hospital mourning family. It was awful. So yeah, that was a new gift. And then my gifts were just majorly heightened because I completely now can see the other side. And because everything on the other side was telepathic, I didn't say one word the entire time I was there, but I communicated the whole time without saying physical words. So before, when I would channel, like my guides always, if you notice, I look to this is my right. They stand in the corner of the room. And before, they would be there and they would talk and I would listen and then I would repeat. Now I don't have to. Their thoughts become my words. So I don't have to kind of listen and then try and put what they're saying in my words to make it make sense. And so that's been made like way easier. So doing readings and stuff is a lot easier now.
yeah, I was just thinking it would be so much easier because sometimes it's hard to interpret what they're giving you and put it into
Yeah.
into human words, into your own words to
Yeah. And then
enable you to
sometimes
convey
things
it.
get lost in translation, right? Like maybe I'm interpreting something they're saying wrong. And now my human self, I kind of get it to the side. I ask it to stand to the side and then they just talk through me, which
Yeah.
is much, much easier.
So when you were in the ward and you could hear everyone's thoughts, could you also hear thoughts from the other patients?
Yeah. Everything.
Yeah, wow.
It was, it was awful.
Yeah.
It sounds, like that What
Yeah,
Women
I but
Want movies, like where it's
yeah.
like, oh, that would be what. No, it was awful. And
Yeah.
especially they move you a lot. Like I was in the sort of neuro ICU, and then I was in a room, and then I was in a hallway. That was the worst, the people walking by me in the nurses station. But when I was in a room, there was a tiny little old lady that was nonverbal, who I think had also had a stroke. And she was just not, she just wanted to die. Well, that's not fun to listen to when she can't tell anyone that that's what she wanted. Yeah, it was not the best.
Yeah.
um, I've gotten used to it now,
Yeah.
but
And so
yeah.
you can, when you say got used to it, is it a case of getting used to it, or like is it still there and you can sort of put it to the side and ignore it, or have you learnt to
More
sort
like
of use it?
boundaries.
Yeah.
I boundaries most of the time. And to be fair, I have made a really great recovery, but there's certain things that I don't do anymore. Like I don't go to busy restaurants because it's too overstimulating. And I wouldn't want to, because people's thoughts in busy restaurants are just overwhelming as well. Right. So I don't surround myself in a ton of people, but I also now have complete faith that when needed, and especially if I'm working or doing a group, my guides will help shut that off so that I can just channel what they're saying.
Yeah.
But it's not
So,
always fun, like it's not nice to be able to know when people think you're totally crazy, right? I was born a psychic medium. Half the world thinks I'm a complete nutcase and should be checked into a psych ward. And I know the second I meet somebody, if they're scared of me, or if they think I'm full of crap, or if they think I'm just abusing people and taking their money, so that's not, sometimes inside thoughts should stay inside.
yes, yeah, no, I don't think that's really an ability that serves us as humans.
No, no, not at
You
all.
have to be a little bit ignorant and blind to things, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think it just helps navigate this world a little bit more, especially when
Yeah.
you put into the mix all the human emotions that we have,
Well, and people get
because
very like, being related to somebody who has a severe brain injury is hard. And so people get frustrated because I hyper focus and I do things much differently, and certain things I just won't do, even though I know I should. And I shut things, and I can go, I have issues controlling my emotions now because that part of my brain is gone. And so I'll get annoyed really quick. And then it takes me a while to apologize. So knowing that I've made somebody mad, or they're mad at me and I don't want to deal with it yet, it's not fun to always know how everybody is thinking and feeling. But
yeah,
I do
no,
have much better boundaries now, and my guides have helped me to wrap my head around the fact that this is now my life. I'm 2 years down the road from the
yeah.
stroke, so I've had some practice.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier something that a topic I love, although I don't, again, fully grasp it, is the idea of everything happening at once and the
Yeah,
simultaneous time. And I suppose I'm also curious about, alternate timelines. You mentioned, for example, you had options with how you were going to have a stroke. You sort of planned it. There were two options. There was the
yeah,
car accident, or the just on your own. And obviously, at some point you made that choice. I'm assuming is like an alternate timeline. You sort of made that
yeah.
choice, and okay, no, I'm going to go on this timeline, not this one. So do you sort of see that more often in your life now? Like, do you recognize alternate timelines? You know what I mean? Like when they
Yes,
approach
it's
decisions that
it's
you make?
easier for me to see it for other people than it is for me to see it for myself. There's a lot of aspects, especially with my gifts, that are not actually for me at all. So, when I'm living my life and making decisions, I don't ask my guides for their opinion, because they'll always lead you down the path of the most learning. And I think I've learned enough. And so I'm going to make my human decisions
Yeah.
with encouragement from my guides. They kind of say yes or no to things like this. Some people contact me for interviews or whatever, and they say, yes, this person, oh, probably no, that person.
Yes.
And I just trust them with that. But, I don't necessarily delve into all the things I do for other people for my own life. So I never want to know what my kids are going to do like in the future. I don't want to know their timeline. My husband, I don't want to know. So I can understand the alternate realities, the different choices. I have a better ability probably to grasp the options of a choice that we're trying to make, but I try not to focus too much on the fact that everything's so up in the air because it's overwhelming. I can do it for other people, but I also have a lot of boundaries when it comes to my work. There's certain things I won't do. So unless, like, if you're making a choice, everybody wants to know, what am I going to do for work? Like, should I take this job, or should I move, or whatever? Unless it's a 95% chance or above that you are going this way, I won't say anything. And I just say, sorry, it's not decided right now. A lot of people always want me to predict outcomes of certain things like elections and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's 95% or more, there's no point telling it, because free will exists and the future can change literally like the snap of a finger. So I try not to focus too much on the things that we are capable of doing on the other side, and shouldn't maybe be participating too much in here. I feel like it's almost like cheating. If I tell everybody certain things, it's like, yeah, but the outcome might be totally different because I did that. Like if I tell somebody, yes, you have that job interview next week and you're 100% going to get it. And then you go, oh, yep, I'm getting it. So I'm not going to continue to prepare. Maybe you were going to read through all their information over this week so you could be prepared. Then you don't do it because I told you you can get the job. You go for the interview and you screw the entire thing up. And now you're the 5% that you weren't going to be able to get the job. Right. So I think ego can get in the way with people like me, because we know it, and we could be maybe celebrated for saying, or, oh, I want to tell you all this stuff because it's going to happen. And then when it happens, you can be like, man, oh, Amber knew all that stuff. That's just my ego talking. And I think that's hard to separate sometimes. And I think that's why not everyone should or can do this work, because there's so much that you have to learn and so many boundaries you have to have in place. And you have to be so careful to not let your ego take over, because I know what I'm going to share it, because then I look important. And it's hard. It's a daily thing. And I think you have to check yourself constantly.
Yeah, but I think that's also the challenge of being human, isn't it? It's learning to
Yeah.
live and wrangle with that ego side, no matter what it is that we're
Yeah.
doing. I hear a lot of people, especially in the spiritual community, who often say, you have to drop the ego, you've got to lose the ego, and everything like that. And I sort of disagree to an extent. I think the ego is part of being human. We
Yeah.
chose to come here, we chose to come to Earth. The ego is part of us. However, it shouldn't drive our decisions and,
Yeah.
rule our lives. And it's almost that learning to control and balance it, figure
Yeah.
out when it's needed, when it's not, is, I think, more important than, I mean, I don't think you could ever really get rid of it completely. It wouldn't
No.
really
Well,
be
and you need
human,
that
right?
sort of that mind body soul connection, right? The the body needs to be there in order to function with your mind and your soul, and it has to kind of work perfectly. And it's like, what's that called, like trial and error. When I first accepted my gifts, I just wanted everybody to know everything because I was so excited. So like, you're going to get pregnant, or somebody is going to die on this day, that sort of stuff. But it's not actually helpful to say those things, and I didn't realize it wasn't helpful until I did stuff and there were unintended consequences, or maybe I didn't get the whole picture. So there was a person who had struggled to get pregnant for over 10 years, and I knew she was going to get pregnant. And I told her the month she was going to get pregnant, and she did get pregnant, and she lost the baby very, very quickly after. So, like, I didn't see that outcome. I just saw the really exciting thing,
Mm.
and not the fact that that baby wasn't going to live. You know,
Mm.
I told a family when somebody was going to die because he was on the way out and was clinging, but then everybody blamed me. Like, you put it out into the universe and then he died. And so maybe if you hadn't said that, he would still be with us for a couple of months. So, it's like it's a learning curve and experience. And I'm still learning every day. And everything's so different now after the stroke and the NDE. So it's another learning curve of learning other things.
Yeah, well, we are here to learn, aren't we? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the whole point. It's the whole reason, really. Well, I believe it is the whole reason we come to Earth is we
Yeah.
have these lessons to learn. And yeah, whether, at the time, some lessons are hard,
Yeah.
and at the time we think, why would we ever choose to go through this? But, I believe on the other side, we completely understand why we chose to do it.
Yeah.
It makes sense. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that in terms of like,
Everything makes sense. Yeah.
yeah.
On the other side, it's just like, wow, like I can't believe I didn't get that as a human. Like, it just makes so much, every connection, every painful thing we go through, there's 100% a reason behind all of it. And it's all focused on learning. We come here to learn the things that kind of don't exist on the other side. Like, the other side is literally home and love. That's it. Like, it's not, there's no trials or tribulations. There's no like strife. There's no pain. And but there's also so much respect for the human existence, and so much celebration for the fact that we wake up every day continuing to say, okay, what am I learning today? Even if we don't know or think that consciously, like, everything makes sense. That was maybe the most sort of profound thing outside of like my feet in the grass and my feet in the water, which I went back and forth from the whole time I was making the decision. But the most profound thing was the no why. Like, there was no, every time they would show me a different scene or show me different things of what was going to happen, I didn't question it. I didn't think, well, why would I ever do? Because everything makes sense. Every lesson, every moment of this life is like planned perfectly in its imperfection. And we understand that. It doesn't mean it translates here. We can try to wrap our heads around the fact that these awful things that seem to happen to certain people have a purpose and are a lesson and that sort of stuff. But a human can't really fully wrap their heads around the fact that, yes, like, even though it sucks and you don't want to do XYZ right now and it keeps happening, there is a lesson and a purpose.
And that's really, like you said, really hard for us to grasp and wrap our human brains around. As to,
Yeah.
well, why, why would this happen? And because, as humans, that's what we do. We try and understand things. We're always going, but why?
Yeah.
Everything needs to have a meaning or a reason. I mean, sure, it does have a reason, but we just don't see it, I think,
Yeah.
as humans, right? And I know, and this actually happens a fair bit, in my regressions that I do. People will go to a past life or whatever, and they go through everything. They go through the, if they go through the point of dying and then the other side, and they get to that part and they realize, oh, actually, there were so many things that I worried about didn't really matter, or not didn't matter, but you look at things completely differently. It's
Yeah.
not a case of, you know, um, yeah, it's actually very hard for me to put it into words as well, because I know from my own experiences when I've gone through it, you look back on your life and you think, oh, all those things that mattered at the time, or you thought were a big deal, you just kind of look and go, oh yeah. Like, there's just nothing
Yeah.
attached to it, no emotion, no, it was like, oh yeah, cool, I learned that from that.
Yeah.
And that was sort of just it was very emotionless, but not in a sterile way. It's very hard to put into
Yeah.
words. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Even my kids now say the stroke was character development. Like, we learned so much as a family and so much about how connected we are. None of us are angry about it. Like, my kids don't live in trauma. To be fair, I put them in counseling and therapy and every right after so that we
yeah.
could all come to this. It didn't magically happen, but when we look back on it, yeah, they say that's their word for it is character development, and they are so grateful that it happened. All of us are, because it brought us so much closer. We now live every day thankful and grateful. That doesn't mean our lives are perfect. I'm raising teenagers, and teenagers are hard, but we don't live in the pain of it. The first 18 months we did, it was awful, but now already only 2 years out, we look back and go, wow, like it actually, everything we went through was so amazing. And it's so amazing that we are here now. And they're, what, 15 and 16 now. And it's just, I think having an outlook of like everything has a lesson. There's something behind everything. We might not figure out what it is, but there's a reason that it's happening, and having gratitude for that, and that for our ability to learn. People ask me all the time, because I do live videos like on my Facebook page, and probably one of the top like 3 questions I get asked is like, what is the purpose of my life? Like, why am I here? What is the purpose of all of this pain? The answer always without fail is we are here to learn. That's it. Like, that is the purpose. That has a lot of branches coming out from it, but that's it. We are here to learn, and we want to be here. We're not forced here. There's no like, old, I always say this and then people get mad at me, but however you see as God, and it's always like an old man, right? Saying, this is what you have to do, here you go. And it's like a punishment or judgment type thing. That doesn't exist. We come here willingly, joyful, and with love to learn. And we're so happy to do it.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting that you bring that up, because you mentioned earlier that your family was not religious, or is not
Yeah.
religious, your family. So tell me, what were before your near-death experience, how would you have described God before your experience versus how you describe or think of God now?
I don't, my family wasn't religious. My mom is now, but I chose religion when I was 15, because I was going down the wrong path. And so as a 15-year-old, I started going to churches. I found a church, and I was a like born again Christian until I accepted my gifts at 35. So I still had, even though I say my beliefs are spiritual rather than religious, I still had that sort of view of God as this all powerful, judgy kind of being. Then I accepted my gifts, and it changed, but it still had the feeling of like a judgy father figure. And when I went to the other side and saw like God isn't a being, God is literally everything and encompasses everything and just emanates love, it changed. And it's like a golden rainbow sort of presence that even when I do things that are difficult for me, or if I'm having a really hard day, most of the time I'm talking to my guides. But if it's like I'm in the trenches for some reason, I call on God, and it's just this overwhelming feeling of love that takes over my entire body. I don't do it very often because I do feel like I need to learn the human lessons and participate in the human world. But it's hard to explain it until you truly, truly feel it and remember it. Before the stroke, I actually got this necklace. I ordered it because it just called to me, and it came a few days before the stroke, and I couldn't understand why I wanted it so bad, and like why it just I needed it. And when I came back from the other side, this is the closest color that I've seen here on earth that is the closest color to God, to that energy. So it's like a golden rainbow, I don't know,
It's
hue.
very hard to describe, isn't it? It's like
Yeah,
a
because it
clear, but
shines.
it's goldeny. It's yeah.
Yeah, and then in different lights, it's blue and it's purple, and it's so I was drawn to it because I knew that I was going to go to the other side. So my view has changed in a more loving way. I don't ever think of God as like that judgy father figure anymore. And that was totally my human belief and had a lot to do with my past and that sort of stuff rather than, what the church was telling me. But now it's more like God is everything, everything loving, everything bad, everything.
Yeah, and like I said, you know, I I also believe that, or I've heard, and I do believe this, that to an extent we judge ourselves.
Yeah,
We judge ourselves when we go back, and it's not judges in a punishment way. I don't believe that at all. I don't think we think, oh, you've been bad. It's more a case of, oh, oh yeah, you perhaps didn't do that so well. Maybe you need to go and do that, or you didn't learn that. Let's learn that again. And it's more from a place of wanting to evolve, I believe, as a
yeah,
soul versus, oh, you're bad, you're good, or I don't actually
yeah,
believe in any of that. That doesn't resonate with me at all. Um, but obviously, I don't have the insight and the experience you do, but just from
yeah,
what I've sort of learned and read and you know experienced in various other ways, that's sort of my belief.
yeah,
And yeah, so I like that you're saying that, because I'm thinking, oh, okay, so maybe I'm right. That's good, because
yeah,
like you, I was uh, had some, I would call it, let's call it religious influence in my earlier
yeah.
years. That sort of imprints into your mind a
It
little bit.
does. Yeah.
You sort of, it's hard to shake that off. So yeah, it's definitely
And the
an
fear
interesting
of
thought.
judgment. I had so much fear of judgment, especially because I chose religion at 15 and the church told me the way I was born was wrong, right? Talking to dead people, being a psychic, it's called like a false prophet. And it was wrong. And so it took me, I'm grateful I did it because I think it kept me alive. And I finally felt like I belonged somewhere, which I needed that because it's like I came to this earth, nothing made sense to me coming into a human body. And so I'm grateful for all of that. But I had such a fear of judgment it's like I was trying to purposely hide myself so that nobody knew that there's dead people everywhere that are always trying to talk to me, or I never wanted people to know that I could see that certain things were going to happen to them, because it was shameful in my belief system. And it took a long time. And I actually was still going to church, taking my kids to church, and I was a Sunday school teacher when I accepted my gifts. And so I went to like one of the church elders and told them, like, this is what's going on for me. And they said, the talking to dead people is totally fine. They call it something else. I don't remember what it was. My empath ability is totally fine. The psychic gifts are essentially of the devil, and that one I would have to do away with. I'm like, well, I don't know how. So, and that's when I stopped. I didn't go back to church after that because I'm like, I can't pretend to not be me anymore. It just doesn't make sense anymore. But I did. I was like you. I kind of carried that religious undertone with me, um, for sure, for the first few years after accepting my gifts. And I think it kind of goes with you the rest of your life. Like it is a, a base of belief that can really influence a person in a fearful way for me, that, oh God, like I'm going to do something wrong and I'm going to be punished for all of eternity. Like that doesn't sound fun.
Yeah, well, of course, it's in a fearful way. I mean, that's probably without wanting to go too much down a rabbit hole here, but it's the easiest way to
Yeah.
control, isn't it? And to influence
Yeah.
is through fear.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. If you think
it's
you're going to burn in hell for all eternity, you'll do almost anything,
yeah,
to not do that.
yeah, of course,
So
no one would like that idea, but
no, well, and the people, so I saw on the other side, I'll mention like my grandma, both my grandmas and my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was very Catholic. And my one grandma, they're not called Mormon anymore. They don't like that word, the Latter-day Saints or whatever. And they were both in the exact same place, even though both beliefs only believe their church everybody will get the opportunity to repent or whatever, but their church is the only one going. They were both there. They were both, and my grandma actually did communicate and said, like, we all go to the same place. So you were right on that one, because she was so loving and she was so happy when I chose religion. But she would always say, it's a little sad, dear, that you didn't choose the right religion. Like, it's good that you love God, but I would really love if you would choose. So I would always go to her church and that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, they were all in the exact same place.
Yeah,
There wasn't one of
good.
them.
It's good that you chose God, just the wrong one.
Yeah, like, just could you choose it in a different way? But she was, to be fair to her, she was never judgy about it. She was always very loving about it. Like, she wasn't like, you're going to hell or anything like that. But she definitely often would say, oh, like, maybe a little bit different with the view on the God.
Oh, that's good. At least she was good about it. And
Yeah.
like, that's good. Talking about that, like, how did when you obviously with your stroke, you were non-verbal for a while afterwards,
Yeah.
and that would have been horrible. But when you were able to communicate more, did you share your near-death experience right away with people around you, or
Yeah.
did it take a while to come out? Like, were you like, oh, do I bring it up? Am I going to sound crazy,
As
or do
soon
I
as
just
I could
say it?
talk, the second I could talk at all. And then, because, so I, again, have a lot of deficits. In the beginning, they were very prominent. So I would say the same things over and over again, and I didn't know I was repeating myself. So once I started telling people about my near death experience, I was telling everyone. And so I was in the hospital for just over 2 weeks. Every tech, every nurse, I had a bunch of CTs and tests, every doctor, every medical profession that came into the room, I would be like, you know what, did you hear that when I had the stroke, I went to the other side and it was great. Like, I told absolutely everyone for about the first, like, couple couple of weeks, because I was like on a high. Like, I was not sad at all. I had the other side with me. Like, I could taste it, I could feel it. They were so close. And so I was not like, I was, my family thought that might be part of the brain damage. Like, the doctor said, like, she might not be able to go in a different level of emotions because I couldn't control my emotions. And whatever happened, or however long that you stays with you, just like that, it was gone. And I was back to being very human. I was angry. I was depressed. I was so frustrated because I couldn't talk. So all that, like, me wanting to tell everybody, went away. And so I did document my whole recovery through live videos. And people would ask constantly, because I had said in the beginning I had an NDE, and then I didn't want to talk about it. And I didn't want to talk about the other side. And I didn't want to talk about what happened, because it was, I wanted to go there so bad that when I brought it up or talked to somebody about it, I that night would pray to die, because I didn't want, I felt like such a burden. I felt like this life was so horrible. To be fair, they put me on very, very strong anti-seizure medication the first 6 months. And a rare side effect of this certain medication is it causes suicidal thoughts. And it did that for me. And they tried to switch me to a different one. And I got very, very sick and ended up in the hospital, because you have to get to a max dose of the new one before you can lessen the one you're on. So that the first 6 months, I did want to kill myself. And it wasn't always because I actually wanted to, it was a side effect of the medication. But yeah, I wanted to talk about it until I didn't. And then I didn't want to talk about it at all. And then I was like, how am I going to write a book about that? How am I going to talk about it and that sort of stuff if I don't want to talk about it at all? So they weren't lying when they said that first 6 months would be horrible. Once I was off the seizure medications, like 6 months in, it started to get a bit better. But yeah, every time people would ask, I just didn't want to talk about it. And everybody wanted to know, and I didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, so it just kind of switched off and
Yeah.
but how did you find people's reaction to it? Like, was there anyone, like, did it change relationships with people around you, with anyone, or was everyone really accepting of it?
Um, it's hard to say because a lot of relationships changed, and I don't know if it was the NDE or
Mm,
that I'm brain injured.
mm,
Because it's very, especially in the beginning, like I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk, I couldn't eat, I couldn't do anything. And it's very hard to maintain a friendship or relationship with somebody like that. And even still, in the beginning, the whole world, that all the people I knew were sending messages and thoughts and prayers and all that. Never heard from more than half of them ever again. So I don't know what necessarily caused the shift. I'm suspecting it's more because I already was a psychic medium. So the people that didn't believe in that sort of stuff had already kind of pieced out like years before. So
yeah.
most people that knew and loved me knew that I talked to dead people, that I'm psychic and that sort of stuff. So having an NDE didn't push them over the edge. It was more having a very brain injured person and a person who like I'm a new me. The old me is gone and I won't ever be that person again. And I think that's hard for people. So I think it was more the brain injury
Mm,
made a lot of people kind of piece out. As
yeah.
far as like my job and stuff, I think it brought more people to me because I now had 100% faith in what I was talking about all those years.
Mm, yeah, I suppose you sort of, you, before you have the experience, but you don't know.
Yeah.
You sort of have some idea from what you've heard, but you don't
Yeah.
know from the perspective of having gone through it. And now
Yeah.
that you're having it, I suppose it's similar to like what we were speaking about before. You have this embedded belief, um, from whether it be religious upbringing or influences, that even if you think to yourself, yeah, I don't resonate with that, I don't believe that, there is still that part of you that sort of niggles underneath,
Yeah.
in decisions or in belief. But once you've experienced something else and you see that, oh, okay, actually, that is the way it is, it's much easier to, you know, well, it's easier to believe, full stop, in
Yeah.
what it is that you think you believe in at the moment.
Yeah.
Because you see it from that different place, or that different perspective completely.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, so yeah, I suppose it is hard to tell, isn't it? Like you say,
Yeah.
people check out of your life anyway, don't they?
Yeah.
Regardless.
Yeah.
But it would be hard to maintain a friendship, with someone. It, yeah. And with your gifts as well, do you feel like, I've often wondered this, with psychic abilities and mediumship, maybe both. There's always that higher self part of us that is there while
Yeah.
we're here, and there's fragments, I believe, of us there and here. We're all connected. And do you feel that's where gifts come from? Like, for example, being able to tap into your higher self, to that place of all knowing. Do you, yeah, do you feel like that's where the gifts sort of come from? Is that where you feel like the information comes from? Or for you, is it more through your guides?
I think both. I think like if there was going to be a how to, it would be maybe more simple to help humans connect with their higher self, because then the possibilities are sort of limitless. Whereas if you are trying to talk to your guides and like do Q&A with them, you actually have to start to understand and recognize and get to know a completely different being. Whereas when you're talking with your higher self and connecting with that, I think that's a little bit more simple for just somebody to start to understand. But I think it's hard for humans to understand sometimes that we're not meant to know everything, like our guides aren't there to say, this is what you're supposed to do. And so when everybody, and I've taught classes and stuff about like connecting with your intuition and stuff like that. And even in those, I'm helping you to connect with yourself, not your guides, not God, not higher dimensional beings. It's just yourself, because there is this higher you that's always on the other side that can help you learn and guide you and that sort of stuff. So I think if you were going to like start from the beginning, it's more bang for your buck if you get to know your higher self and the sort of infinite capabilities and possibilities of being able to understand that there is a piece of you that's always on the other side. So you're never here alone.
Yeah. And yeah, to me that, it does make sense. And I've always sort of wondered that because I hear, with a lot of either psychics or mediums, some of them, obviously everyone operates differently as well, but, I hear a lot of terminology such as, my guides say this, or, versus them not saying that and
Yeah.
saying they just get the information however they get it versus it's coming from my guides.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered whether people with those abilities are tapping into that higher self, into that
Yeah.
place or that part of them that knows everything, that part that stays there in
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, wherever that is,
Yeah.
in that other place. So I find that really fascinating too. And I think as humans, we do have the ability to tap into that for ourselves, but I also think it's not a library where you can just choose, oh, I want to know this and get that information
Yeah.
because, as you said, we're not meant to know everything.
Yeah. Well, it's
Otherwise,
not
it's the
helpful.
game
It's not,
away.
yeah.
It's
And it's
you wouldn't
like,
learn if you're given the answer.
it's when with my like medical intuition, I won't say anything unless it's preventable. So if somebody's going to get Alzheimer's in 20 years and I say that to them, they're going to manifest it way sooner than 20 years because they're going to hyper focus. Every little lapse in memory, they're going to be like, oh God, is that Alzheimer's? And because they're thinking of it all the time, they're going to be much sicker much faster. So having sort of the infinite knowledge from the other side all the time is not necessarily helpful, and you have to sort of sift through. And so, after the stroke, for sure, I just had everything all the time. And so it's almost like I had to relearn all my boundaries because it's not helpful to exist how I was when I had the NDE, knowing absolutely everything. That's not helpful for me. It actually causes me a lot of anxiety when I know horrible things are going to happen. And then every once in a while, like I've known a couple times because I have an aging dad, that if he went and did XYZ, he would fall and break his hip. So then I just, if it's preventable and only a small chance or small lessons that he would learn from that, I can tell him, hey, maybe don't go to that place because you're going to step off a curb and you break your hip because you're old. Um, so I can prevent certain things, but I think it's definitely a learning experience every day trying to set those boundaries. And if you don't set those boundaries, I think you just live in anxiety all the time because it's like, oh God, what am I feeling? Is it a good feeling? Is it a bad feeling? Am I meant to be doing something or saying something? So if it's not helpful or if it's not serving a purpose, I don't want to know.
And I suppose, if you were to tell people things that doesn't serve a purpose or it's not preventable, I mean, you're really not helping them, are you? Like
No, I'm just
you're
making
making things
anxiety
worse.
for them.
Yeah, exactly. You're giving them
Yeah.
anxiety and possibly even changing, um, for example, like the job interview you said earlier, changing their best possible outcome.
Yeah.
If they change their behavior, because we all have free will, they change their
Yeah.
behavior based on what you say, and that good outcome that you saw was never going to happen. So,
Yeah.
or can't possibly then happen because, yeah. So it would be hard to sift through and work
Yeah.
out. Okay, no, that's no good. Yep, that's and because the last thing you want to do when you're reading for someone is, I mean, is say or do anything that's going to not be good for them. You want to give them
Yeah.
information that's going to help them in some
Yeah.
way, shape, or form. And I think that's what people ultimately want. Um,
Yeah.
they want that assistance and things like that. Now you mentioned earlier you have a book. Tell me about that.
So my guide said I would write at least 3 books when I was on the other side. In the beginning, I was like, yeah, right. How? Like I can't type. I can't spell anymore. That went out the window. And I used to be very like, I wrote poetry and stuff like that. And I couldn't do any of that. I couldn't even read. But when was it? So a year after the stroke, every time something is going to happen, the perfect person just gets put in my path. And so quite a few people had messaged me saying, I'll help you. I can type really. And I say, no. But this one person, her name was Sarah, she contacted me and my guides were like, yes, this is who you want to work with. And in 10 weeks, we went from having no book to having a fully written book. And I published it, like self-published, last November. I can show you. I don't know. Are you doing a video or is it just
yeah, at the Street
okay.
of Eternity? Yeah.
Yes. And
I love
it
that
is,
cover.
yeah, that's me.
Oh, is that
I
you?
went, yeah, this is where I live. This is just by my house in like
Oh,
because I
wow.
live on Vancouver Island, so it's like temperate rainforest. So yeah. Um, So we wrote this. Well, I wrote, she typed, and I published it last November. And it's the story of a little bit of my life before, my history, just to make it all make sense. The stroke, the NDE, and then it has just everything I've kind of learned. There's a chapter about boundaries and gifts and empaths. And there is a chapter, each of my guides have a chapter. So my guides' names are Jessica, Peter, and Gail, and they each have a chapter where it's like a Q&A with them. And it has pictures, although the actual book, they're not in color. And then every chapter starts with a poem that I wrote. So some were from before the stroke, I wrote them, but a bunch of them were after the stroke because I did get my ability to write poetry back.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And so that's book 1 of 3, apparently.
Yep, but we'll see what the other ones are about. My guides have lots of ideas, but I'm very neuro fatigued a lot of the time. So I maybe say no more often than I say yes. And so I'm just slowing it down. And my goal always, I wanted to raise my kids before I did too much with my gifts, and that hasn't changed. So, my kids are still at home. They are getting older. They're going to, both of them graduate in the next 2 years. And then hopefully I'll know what other books are going to be about.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. So, and that's the thing too, that your guides probably have all these different ideas, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you need to choose. Like the choice
Yeah.
is to come from you, right? You can't have them tell you exactly what to write because
Yeah.
it's not from you. And that's the
Yeah.
important part, I believe. And if people want to have a look at that book, purchase that book, where can they do that from? Where's that available?
So, well, I self-published on Amazon, but then most bookstores have picked it up. So you can kind of buy it, I think, anywhere. It's in Canada, Indigo chapters, I don't know, Target, Barnes and Noble, kind of anywhere you could buy books, because it went to bestseller. That first week, it was like top bestseller, like in Canada. Most of the bookstores, I think they usually pick up all the top bestsellers. So I think it's available on most places. I love when people purchase it on Amazon because you're actually buying it from me, whereas when you're buying it from a bookstore, that it's kind of out of my hands. But yeah, on Amazon, anywhere else. And then people can find me on social media. My sort of business name is West Coast Medium. I'm on Facebook. That's where I do most of my live videos. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, all that. I did get a TikTok. I never post on it because people are really mean on TikTok. And so I'm brain injured and I have a hard time dealing.
Yeah, I don't even have an account. I don't know
Yeah.
why. A few of my friends say, oh, John, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah, well, and you get lots of love, but there's more hate, and the hate is really loud. And I think for any human that's hard, but when you're brain injured, it's hard for people to constantly tell me I'm going to hell.
Yeah, no, that's not, you don't need to hear that. Even though you know
Yeah.
that's not true, right? You're still like, that's just that human
Yeah.
side of you still gets impacted.
Yeah.
You don't really know. And just one final question before we wrap up. If there was one, just one lesson or learning that you could take from being on the other side, one bit of information that you're like, I just need to know this, that's what I would take back with me.
Honestly, the number one thing is that we are never alone. We might feel alone. It's the weirdest world we live in right now because we are so much more connected to the rest of the world, and we have never felt more alone because it's like our world has just gotten smaller and smaller. We're on our phones, but we're not actually participating. And there's this profound sense of loneliness, like we're not connected. We are never alone. We are here to learn, and it's hard, but we're never learning alone. We have an entire cheering squad on the other side that is here for us at any given moment. And even when we're in our most sort of desperate moments, there is love everywhere around us. We just have to realize it's there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's very reassuring to know as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a very lonely world at the moment.
Yeah.
We are so connected, but we're not.
Yeah.
We're
It's
connected.
strange. The more we're connected, the lonelier we are.
I'm sure when it was centuries ago and everyone was living in their villages and very isolated, you probably felt more connected with
Yeah, because people would knock on
100
your door.
people.
If they didn't see you that day, they would knock on your door. Hey, what's going on? Are you feeling okay? No, let me bring you a meal. Now we don't do that at all.
Yeah, it's
Oh my
crazy,
gosh.
isn't it? We know so many people, but that's yeah. But
Yeah.
I think we'll wrap up. But thank you so much, Amber. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Yes, thank you so
Your
much.
story is so fascinating, and yeah, I'm sure I probably have 10,000 more questions, but we need to wrap it up. But thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having
Yes,
you. I'll
thanks for
pop
having me.
all of your links and whatnot in the show notes as well. If anyone is interested in having a look at any of that, that'll all be there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.